for the day. Do you want me to go really fast and get it all in, or do you want me to take my time so you can learn? Okay, I'll take my time. All right. Now, some of the things that you need to understand, and this goes back to normal anatomy and physiology, is remember, in order to function appropriately, our cells are differentiated. Okay, my heart muscle cells are different than my pancreas cells. They're differentiated. They're differentiated from that precursor cell that everything arises from. Okay? So differentiation means that cells can perform different functions. And we want cells to be differentiated. A lack of differentiation means willy-nilly growth without any purpose. And all of our cells are supposed to have a purpose to function normally. Okay? So, does that make sense? So, differentiated cells, benign. Benign or normal. Undifferentiated cells, cancer. Okay? Mitosis is part of the cell cycle we just talk about. When we talk about cancer, we talk about mitosis and cell replication because that's how we determine how we're going to treat it a lot of times. And it also will tell you that, cells who are undergoing rapid mitosis are tumorous. I'm making up words. Are tumors, okay? And they can be cancerous. They have a lot of mitotic figures, right? A mutation, that tends to be cancerous. And it's when the DNA is altered. We've already talked about apoptosis. I'm going to keep saying it, apoptosis.
How is it pronounced? Because I'll say
How's it pronounced?
apoptosis.
Apoptosis. Like an apple. Apoptosis. 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 What? Never heard of it? Apoptosis, cell suicide. It's normal. It's when cells are supposed to die. They normally. Apoptosis. How have you heard it? Apoptosis. Tomato, pecan. All right. Spell it correctly. All right. Now, neoplasms or a tumor. You can call a neoplasm a tumor. That's a new growth. And it's not responding to normal genetic controls, okay, which means that it's replicating willy-nilly, okay? It just reproduces without a need, okay? Now, one of the things that happens is, these new cells need nutrition, so they tend to produce a lot of blood cells. These blood cells tend to be really fragile. But they also divert blood from cells or tissue that needs the blood. Okay, so they're bloodsuckers, and they take the nutrition from other cells, regardless of whether they're cancer or benign. Cancer tends to be a little bit worse with it, but benign tumors can do the same thing. They have to have blood vessels, and they have to get nutrition, and they continue to grow. Now, the characteristics of a tumor depends on what tissue it arises from. Okay, and the structure and growth pattern. That's just, basic kind of knowledge there. If it's a benign tumor and you're looking at the nomenclature or how it's named, it ends in oma. Any kind of tumor that ends in oma means that it's benign. And in this context, what that means is it's not cancerous. It doesn't mean that it's not going to do you harm. Really? I have a benign tumor in my brain. It's not a cancerous tumor, but it's a benign tumor that's going to continue to grow in this area that doesn't stretch. Is it really not going to do me any harm? No. How about a tumor that grows in your belly and it keeps growing, keeps growing, keeps growing? What is it going to compress? Your intestines. It could compress your aorta. It could compress your renal artery. It's all kinds of stuff that it can compress. I'll tell you this. I had a benign tumor on my left fallopian tube when I was in college. And because, your fallopian tube's kind of out there free floating, this tumor would rotate my fallopian tube, and a lot of times it would unrotate. But the one time that it stayed rotated, it caused ischemia. And I almost lost that fallopian tube in my ovary. That is not a benign freaking tumor, okay? That is a tumor that's going to cause damage, but it's not cancerous. All right, malignant tumors end in carcinoma. So what is an adenoma? Tell me that. What kind of tissue does an adenoma affect? What? A gland, an endocrine gland in specific. Very good. So, and that's actually one of the most frequently occurring one is on the pituitary gland. It can be an adenoma, but it causes all kinds of problems because it's up there in your brain, it's pushing on your optic nerve and stuff like that, okay? So tumors of connective tissue are called sarcomas, but they are very often malignant. And then you can have tumors that don't follow any real nomenclature thing, that like most of the roads in South Carolina you can refer to by a number, but then you have those odd ones that don't have any numbers, right? They just go by the name. So Hodgkin's disease, Wilms tumor is a renal tumor, and leukemia, those are all normal, okay, names of tumors. Is this in your book? Okay. I'm going to tell you right now that you need to know the stuff that's in tables and boxes and stuff like that in your book. They aren't put out there in boxes and tables and stuff because they're not important. This is why I talked to a publisher about this one time. I'm like, you need to put that stuff in the text. My students don't look at the boxes and tables and stuff. And they said, well, that's where we put all the really important information. I said, really? Okay. So look at your tables and boxes. You need to know that stuff, okay? Anyway, those are just some examples. So a lipoma is a benign tissue, benign fatty tumor. Okay, lots of people have those. And why do you think people get benign fatty tumors removed? Aesthetics, it looks better. They form a lump, and they can keep growing and get bigger and bigger, so they get rid of them. All right, now we talked a little bit, this is the differences between benign and malignant tumors. Remember, benign tumors are differentiated cells that just produce at a higher rate than normal. A goiter can be considered to be a benign tumor. They are encapsulated, meaning that they don't invade the tissue. Okay? When I mean encapsulated, they have a capsule around them. Cancerous tissues don't, and they stick these little pedicles out that invade the tissue. Right? Okay. Now, they cause damage because of compression, and if you have some compression going on, you can compress blood vessels, and that can cause ischemia and a lack of oxygen kind of problem, and they can be life-threatening in the brain. Okay? That's called, I'll think of it in a minute and tell you. All right, malignant tumors are undifferentiated and they're non-functional, or they function in an abnormal way. They have very rapid reproduction and they infiltrate like this into the tissue and they spread to distant sites. What do we call it when they spread to distant sites? Yeah. All right, the word I was looking for up here with the benign tumors was mass effect. Mass effect. That's how they cause damage, is through their mass effect most of the time. Okay? So those are the differences between benign and malignant tumors. And this is just a picture of it, okay? Benign tumors also tend to grow slower than malignant tumors do. Okay? And you see these will look like nice normal cells. If you look over here, you can see a lot of the cells, they're irregularly shaped, and a lot of them have mitotic figures, and you can see that when it's smaller looking. And in your book, because they have this picture in your book. Okay? They have these mitotic figures. One of the things that this can cause is it can invade your blood vessels. What?
When the malignant tumor spread to distant sites.
Metastasis. Metastasis. Sorry, I heard enough people say it. I thought everybody said it. I'm sorry, metastasis. That comes up again later on. And then you have this table in your book. Another table. Know it, love it, live it. Okay? Okay, so one of the other differences between benign and malignant tumors is while if you have a benign tumor removed, it might reoccur, but it will usually reoccur in the same place. It's not going to recur in some other site. Okay. If you have a malignant tumor removed, here's an example. My cousin had a renal carcinoma probably 20 years ago, and he had it removed. Well, the most likely site for that renal cancer to reoccur would be in the lungs, because that's where it metastasizes to. So he died last year of lung cancer because his doctor kept doing pelvic scans instead of thoracic scans. All right. So know these differences here, okay? So the other thing that happens with malignant tumors is not only is there a rapid reproduction of abnormal and mutant cells, they don't know they're supposed to die after a while. There's no apop or apoptosis, okay? And there's no differentiation, there's no organization to it. You know, most of our cells, our tissue, is an organization of cells. When you have a malignancy, there's no organization to it, okay? The other thing is there's no contact inhibition. What do I mean by contact inhibition? It stops growing when it senses other cells. Cancerous cells or malignant cells don't have that contact inhibition. They will grow into that other tissue. That's what gives them that ability to invade. Okay? They also have altered surface antigens, which means that they're not recognized as not cells. Okay? Because most of the time our body can get rid of abnormal cells. You know, it's not like our body 100% of the time produces non-mutant cells 100% of the time. But most of the time when we produce a mutant cell, our immune system attacks it as not normal or as non-self. But with cancerous cells, they have this thing that, and it's a survivor thing, where they have this altered antigen, and so they're not recognized as an invader. Okay? They don't adhere to each other. Most of the time, if you have cells that are the same type of cells, they're going to cling together. Okay? Think about society when you think about this stuff. They're going to cling together, but with cancer cells, they break loose because they want to go cause havoc in other places. Okay? So they break loose. It's also a problem with surgery. A lot of times when people go in and have surgery, if they don't get all of it, they can often seed where they have little minute, like microscopic pieces of cells that break, tissue that break loose and travel to other areas of the body. Now, we usually talk about benign tumors causing the mass effect or compression problems, but cancerous tumors can do that too because they grow and they can cause compression. But that's not usually what causes the most damage with cancer. What causes the most damage with cancer is the invasion and the suckage of all the resources, okay? And the fact that they don't act like normal tissue. Mass effect causes most of the damage in benign tumors, but with cancerous, it's not the mass effect. Okay, that's not what causes the most damage. Does that make sense? That can cause damage, but it's not going to cause most of the damage. Tumor cells secrete enzymes or hormones. There is one tumor that acts just like the parathyroid. Now, you think about what the parathyroid does. It secretes parathyroid hormone. What does that do? Yes, it regulates the blood calcium, but if you're secreting parathyroid hormone, are you increasing or are you decreasing your blood calcium? your pacitator. No, I'll just tell you. It increases it, okay? Increasing your PTH increases your blood calcium. Now, this is where it becomes very important for you to understand what these electrolytes and stuff do. So, what is one of the functions of calcium? Not in your blood. What's one of the functions of calcium in your blood? Muscle contraction. So you have a high level of calcium in your blood, you're going to have muscle spasms. Okay? What else? What else is calcium needed for in your body? What? Nerve impulses, yeah. Okay, let's get away from the musculoskeletal nervous system. What else? Blood clotting. You have to have calcium to clot your blood. So did you know when I was, and this is another thing, you think about it, and this is one of the reasons like I like teaching this stuff is because I can relate things to you. I had a guy who came, this is when I first started working at UT, it was one of my first nights working at UT, and he came in and he had a DVT. He had a DVT and he had a swollen knee. And we couldn't figure out what, and his family was like, well, he's been kind of, they didn't know he had DVT. He just had a swollen leg and he had a swollen knee. He had DVT because of hypercalcemia, because it was his tumor was acting like the parathyroid hormone producing PTH. So he developed the DVT. So they started doing all these tests on him. He had massive lung cancer. And he died during that admission. He died during that admission. He came in with blood clot. Deep vein thrombosis. It's a clot in your leg. It usually occurs in your leg. Deep vein thrombosis. It's just a clot. So people who have tumor cells that secrete hormones, particularly PTH, tend to have clots form. And a lot of times they'll come in and that's like the first thing they'll see is they'll have clots. Another thing that will happen if you're talking about multiple myeloma, which is a type of a cancer that usually occurs in elderly people, it also causes an increased production of PTH, but it will pull the calcium from the bones, and its typical presentation is with bone pain, and then when they do the x-ray, they have like these very not dense, weak areas of their bone. You can almost see through them on the x-rays. All right, so you can have somebody who has cancer has a chronic inflammatory response, and that can damage the cells, and it can also affect the way that the organs function in the rest of the body too. And then angiogenesis. What's angiogenesis? What's angio? Blood vessels. What's genesis? New, right? New blood vessels. So they're producing lots of new blood vessels. And regardless of whether they secrete growth factors or not, they produce a lot of them, but those that secrete growth factors have massive amounts and they bleed very easy because blood vessels are very friable. Get your fingers out of your mouth. So they tend to be anemic. This causes an anemia for two reasons. One, they tend to leak blood, and two, they don't have enough blood to meet the needs of the cancerous tumor, which is one of those things that's like a 2-year-old, me first, right? So they tend to be anemic because they have to meet the demands of the tumor, and they tend to leak blood. All right, warning signs of cancer. I want you to take a look at these, and that's all we're going to have time for today. Okay? I will put the rest of this up.